Hello and good evening. Energy watchers, intelligentsia, opinion makers, industry leaders, academia, policy makers, and even the civil service aspirants in India, they all wait for BP's energy outlook. Last week, BP has come out with the 2022 edition of its World Energy Outlook, and it even has got some part which includes India inside. So I am here to declutter the BP energy outlook for all of you. We will also be talking about India Energy Insight as per the BP numbers and few other insights about the India Energy Outlook. So let me open the presentation. I hope a screen is visible to all of you. One disclaimer that the BP has given: the outlook was largely prepared before the military action by Russia in Ukraine and does not include any analysis of the possible implication of those developments on economic growth or global energy market. So please remember this aspect, that this outlook was largely prepared before Russia's invasion or Russia's military action, as you would like to call it, in Ukraine. This is the World Energy Portfolio. All units are in exajoule. 1 exajoule is equal to 23.8846 million tons of oil equivalent. Please remember this unit because all future numbers as per BP Outlook are in exajoule only. So 1 exajoule is equal to 23.8846 million tons of oil equivalent. The total portfolio size is 627 exajoule. 627 exajoule. So if anyone asks you what is the world energy portfolio size, the total portfolio size, primary energy consumption is 627 exajoule. And the benchmark year which has been taken is 2019. Why 2019? Because 2020 and 2021 were COVID inflicted years, and a benchmark year has been taken 2019 to address any aberrations on account of COVID. So oil, the contribution of oil is 193 exajoule, so 31%. So what is the contribution of oil in the energy portfolio? 31%. Natural gas 140 exajoule, 22%. Coal 158 exajoule, 25%. So oil plus natural gas plus coal means 31% plus 22% plus 25%. The contribution of oil plus natural gas plus coal put together is a staggering 78% in the world energy portfolio. So the contribution of fossil fuel in the total energy basket is still approaching 80%, 78% to be precise, in the world energy portfolio. The renewable, if you look at the renewable number from say 1995 to 2019, from 39 exajoule, the renewable number has increased to 74 exajoule, and you will be looking we will be looking at these numbers very carefully in all our discussion. Even the country specific discussion when we do about India, we will be giving a due attention to renewable number. So the renewable contribution as per 2019 number is 12%, 74 exajoule. What is the oil consumption? World oil consumption 98 million barrel per day. What is the number? 98 million barrel per day. And natural gas 3900 BCM. So please try to remember few numbers. World energy portfolio size 627 exajoule. Total oil consumption 98 million barrel per day. Natural gas 3900 BCM. What is the contribution of the fossil fuel in the total energy basket? 78%. Oil 31%. Natural gas 22%. So oil and gas put together 53%, more than 50%. And when you include coal in it, it goes to a staggering 78%. So remember, up to 80%. Now BP, if you look at the BP energy outlook, last year it had talked about three scenarios: rapid, net zero, and business as usual. This year's energy outlook talks about three scenarios: accelerated, net zero, and new momentum. Please remember, These scenarios are not predictions of what is likely to happen. These are not predictions. The scenario taken collectively are used to explore the range of possible outcomes over next 30 years. So the scenario taken collectively are used to explore the range of possible outcomes over next 30 years. And this will help all the policymakers, industry leaders to build scenarios for the new energy outlook or our road to net zero. Now, accelerated and net zero explore how different elements of energy system might change in order to achieve substantial reduction in carbon emission. The fall in emission in net zero is aided by shift in societal behavior and preferences, which further supports gain in energy efficiency and adoption of low carbon energy sources. The fall in emission in net zero, what it is saying, the fall in emission in net zero is aided by shift in societal behavior and preferences. And we have seen in the last few years how much attention is there on the part of society and even the government and policymakers towards progression to net zero. And this concern has been adequately seen and noticed during the Glasgow summit also. New momentum is designed to capture the broad trajectory along which the global energy system is currently progressing. Now, three scenarios. What are these three scenarios? Three scenarios: accelerated, net zero, new momentum. Look at this graph carefully. The blue line is net zero line. The orange line is accelerated scenario line, and the new momentum is the green line. Emissions in accelerated and net zero peak in early 20s. That is quite evident from the graph. And by 2050 are about 75% and 95% below 2019 levels respectively. So in net zero scenario, emission will be reduced by 95%, and in accelerated scenario, the emission will be get reduced by 75% from 2019 level. And when you look at the 2019 level, it's 40 gigatons of carbon emission. CO2 emission in new momentum peak in the late 20s. Again, that is evident from the graph. When you look at the graph, what you can see from 2027, 2028, it starts coming down. So CO2 emission in new momentum peak in the late 20s, and by 2050 are about 20% below 2019 level. So what are the numbers that you need to remember? That in case of net zero, the carbon emission is getting reduced by 95%. In case of accelerated scenario, by 75%, and in new momentum scenario, by 20%. Please remember, the challenge for the world will be to decouple its energy growth from carbon intensity. This is the challenge, that economic growth has to take place, especially in the regions of emerging economy, but you need to decouple the economic growth from carbon emission. Now, final energy consumption. So total final consumption, when you look at the numbers, total final consumption peaks in early 20s in net zero. You look at the blue line, it peaks in early 20s in net zero, and around 2030 in accelerated scenario. And what is happening in this new momentum scenario? It is picking up in mid 2040s in the new momentum scenario. By 2050, total final consumption is 10 to 25% lower in accelerated and net zero than 2019 level. Again, all numbers are benchmarked against 2019, and around 15% higher in new momentum. So total final consumption in early 20s in net zero, in accelerated by 2030, and by 2050 in new momentum. I am repeating these numbers because these numbers you need to ingrain, because these numbers are very important for scenario building. By 2050, total final consumption is 10 to 25% lower in accelerated and net zero than in 2019 level, and around 15% higher in new momentum. But please look at the another graph. You can make out that in accelerated and in new momentum, whatever growth you can see, this growth is on account of growth in the emerging economies. However, the increasing prosperity and a stronger economic growth in emerging economies means the outlook for energy demand within emerging economies is far stronger than in developed world. So the growth driver will come from emerging economies, and India will play a very important role in driving this growth. Total final consumption across all emerging economies grows by 35% and 5% by 2050 in new momentum and accelerated, and fall by 10% in net zero. In comparison, total final consumption within the developed world falls by 25 to 50% by 2050 across all scenarios. So this you can make out that in developed region, in all three scenarios, the total final consumption is not increasing. In fact, there is a decrease in total final consumption. But in case of emerging economies, total final consumption in accelerated and new momentum scenario is registering a growth. What are the core beliefs as per the 2022 outlook of BP Energy Outlook? Many of you would have gone through the 2020 outlook, energy outlook, which the BP had published, and most of these core beliefs are in line with 2020 outlook. So gradual shift in energy demand, declining role of hydrocarbon, rapid expansion in renewables and electrification. So there will be a more pronounced role for renewables and electrification, and there will be a declining role for hydrocarbon. Energy transition underpinned by range of low carbon energy sources and technologies. Changing nature of global energy markets, more diverse energy mix, increased competition and greater customer choice. We will be discussing about these points in more details in the subsequent slide. And we all know that delaying action increases the risk of a costly and disorderly transition. We had talked about this part in previous slides, but fossil fuel as share of final consumption, you can see, is reducing in all three scenarios. So there will be reduced role of fossil fuel in all three scenarios, and you can see the transition fuel which will drive this transition will be natural gas. So natural gas will play a very important role in transition from fossil fuel to renewable. This is again a very important slide, and I would like all of you to pay due attention to this slide. Now you look at this slide. For much of the past 100 years or so, energy system has been dominated by single source, coal in the first half of 20th century and then oil from 1970. So when you look at this graph, what you can make out, look at this black line and green line. Black line denotes coal and this green line denotes oil. So till 1970, the world energy was mostly dominated by coal, and after 1970, the dominant fuel role has been taken over by oil. Now you look at scenario after 2035 and by 2050, what you can make out, that this greater variety of energy sources together with growing range of technologies that allow for greater substitution between energy sources and carriers of the point. It means the fuel mix is increasingly driven by customer choice rather than availability of different fuels, with the potential for consumers to increase their demands for integration across different fuel and energy services. So perhaps we are entering into a phase where the choice will lie with the consumer, not with the producer. And the demand will be for more integration across different fuel and energy services. You will look for a car which can run on all fuels. You can look for a car, the customer will perhaps prefer a car, say in transportation segment, which runs on hydrogen also, then your natural gas also, and for that matter, even the conventional fuel. So there will be a pronounced demand for integration across different fuel and energy services. To discuss about India insight of BP Energy Outlook and few other important aspects, especially from the students who are preparing for civil services and other state public services. So we'll be discussing in next few slides, especially for my Indian participants, about the BP Energy Outlook and its India insight. What is one important aspect? One important aspect is our 100% growth in primary energy in 2019 to 2050 in all scenarios. When we discuss through numbers in the subsequent slide, this will be more clear to you. Share of coal in the primary energy in 2050 in all three scenarios from 6% to 34%. Share of renewable in primary energy in 2050, 31% to 66%. Why this range? Because this range talks about three scenarios. And minus 71% to plus 96% variation in CO2 emission by 2050 versus 2019 level. The share of coal in total primary energy has been broadly stable around 2019 level, that is 45% over the past 40 years. So coal has remained a dominant fuel in India's energy mix in the last 40 years. However, the coal share declines in all scenarios, reaching between 6% and 34% by 2050. But please remember one point here. Since India's emerging energy demand is going to be more than double in all three scenarios, though the percentage contribution of coal in India's energy mix would definitely reduce in all three scenarios, but importance of coal will be there. In three scenarios, the contribution of coal will vary from 6% to 34% as per BP number. Renewable energy growth is strong in the three scenarios, averaging between 4 to 6% per annum. As a result, renewable energy becomes the largest source of primary energy in 2050 in accelerated and net zero, and the second largest in new momentum after coal. Renewable represents between 31% and 66% of the primary energy in 2050. So what does it mean? It means renewable will be a dominant fuel in all three scenarios. The share of natural gas in total primary energy grows in all scenarios, increasing from existing 5% in 2019 to 12% in 2050 in new momentum. In accelerated and net zero, the gas share in the primary energy is between 8% and 10%. But one aspect which is very important in case of natural gas is the importance of natural gas as a transition fuel in our path to net zero. So natural gas will play a very important role in our path to net zero. Now let us understand these scenarios through numbers. One number, especially those who would have watched my previous video and those who would have gone through the BP outlook of 2020 energy outlook and 2019 a statistical review of the BP, they would remember that in both the outlook and statistical review, BP had projected India number as 34 exajoule. India's primary energy consumption 34 exajoule. This has been revisited to 42 exajoules. So why this change in number? Because renewable number has been revisited. All other numbers are mostly same, but renewable number has been revisited. It has been revisited to 9.1 exajoule. So now as per BP, the India's energy basket is 42 exajoule. I also remember writing this mail to IEA and BP both because there was a variance in the India's primary energy consumption basket size as per BP number and IEA number. Now with this change, this correction, BP has made the correction. So with this correction, what is one thing which is very important, that as per earlier number, the contribution of coal was more than 50%. But now the contribution of coal as per this is how much? You look at this number, contribution of total coal is 19 exajoule as per 2019 number. So coal contributes 45% to India's energy basket. So coal very important, 45%. And in all three scenarios, look at the coal numbers. From 19 exajoule in net zero with all, look at the coal number. Coal number net zero scenario, the coal number from existing 19 exajoule will be 5.2 exajoule. But new momentum, 33 exajoule, and accelerated scenario, 8.6 exajoule. So from 5.9%, that is 6%, to 34%, three scenarios, the contribution of coal will be there. But my request to you would be to especially focus on new momentum numbers when you discuss about India numbers. Why to new momentum? Because when you look at the Panchamrit commitment which the Prime Minister had talked about in Glasgow, we have set 2070 as a benchmark year, not in fact benchmark year, 2070 as a destination year to reach to net zero. And this scenario building which the BP has done is for 2050. So new momentum numbers will be very important while discussing India numbers. So from 42 exajoule, the India's energy size will increase to 96 exajoule in new momentum. And even in net zero, 88 exajoule and accelerated 91 exajoule. So what is the point which is very important here? That in all three scenarios, India's energy basket size is going to be more than double in all three scenarios. Please remember this. And India will be one country which will be driving the growth in the among the emerging economies. Oil from 10 exajoule, this oil in net zero will be 6.1, accelerated 11, and new momentum 18 exajoule. So practically it will double in the new momentum scenarios. Natural gas, very important number. Please pay attention to natural gas. From present 2.1 exajoule in new momentum, it will increase by more than 5 times, 11 exajoule. Coal, even coal demand will double from 19 exajoule to 33 exajoule in new momentum scenario. And renewable from 9 exajoule to in new momentum 30, net zero 58, and accelerated 53. Many times increase in case of renewables. And what India has done in renewables, especially in the power generation, I will be discussing in the subsequent slide, is phenomenal. India's primary energy consumption, when you look at the oil, our current demand is 5 million barrel per day. India's oil demand per day is 5 million barrel per day. And in the new momentum, this 5 million barrel will increase to 9.5 million barrel per day. Natural gas from existing 59 BCM, it would increase to 311 BCM. Look at this number. From existing 60 BCM, 59 BCM, it would increase to 311 BCM. And any increase in our production from 1 million barrel per day, 0.3 million barrel per day. So we are not going to see much from the increase in the production side, but in the demand side, there is a huge jump in India's energy demand. And why this huge jump? Because there will be an increasing prosperity, there will be economic growth, and benefits of economic growth will percolate down to the grassroots level. So there will be more demand for cars, more demand for air conditioning, more demand in the industrial sector. So India's energy demand will increase in all three scenarios. But please pay attention to carbon emission. Current carbon emission is 2.7 gigatons. And as I had discussed in my last video also, that India is one of the among the largest emitter in the world. I think it is third largest emitter in the world. And this is one area where our government and policy makers are very conscious about, and we need to address the carbon emission. But the challenge for the policy makers and the government is to decouple India's economic growth with carbon emission. So economic growth is necessary, we have to increase our GDP size, but growth has to decouple from carbon emission. Now, Panchamrit, this is the commitment that our Prime Minister had given in during the Glasgow summit, that India will get its non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatt by 2030. India will get its non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatt by 2030. And in the subsequent slide, I will talk about India's current generation from non-fossil fuel. India will meet 50% of its energy requirement till 2030 with renewable energy. So by 2030, 50% of India's energy requirement will come from renewable energy. India will reduce its projected carbon emission by 1 billion tons by 2030. So you remember what is the number for India CO2 emission? 2.7 gigatons. So India will reduce projected carbon emission by 1 billion ton by 2030. India will reduce the carbon intensity of its economy by 45%, a staggering 45% by 2030. And India will achieve net zero by 2070. This is what I was talking during my discussion about CO2 emission and net zero, and why you should look at the numbers of new momentum. Now, when you look at the Panchamrit Prime Minister's Narendra Modi's five-fold strategy, please look at this number also, India's current generation capacity, and this is the current data as per the Ministry of Power. So when you look at the India's total power generation, it is 395 gigawatt as on 31/1/2022. 395 gigawatt. 395 gigawatt India's total generation capacity. And out of 395 gigawatt, total fossil fuel contribution is 235 gigawatts. So 60% generation of India is from through fossil fuel only. Renewable hydro is 46 gigawatt. Hydro how much? 46 gigawatt. And wind, solar and other renewable is 105 gigawatt. This is something which is phenomenal growth India has registered in the renewable sector in the last few years. And we all should be proud of India's growth in the renewable. So renewable contribution in the India's generation is 26.8%, but this is without hydro. So when you add hydro, another 12%, this number goes up. So this was my submission on BP's energy outlook. So within a short capsule, I tried to give you limited understanding of the BP's outlook and also India Energy Insight as per BP data. Some other relevant details I have also shared with you. As and when the BP comes out with some other details, as it has mentioned in its energy outlook, then I will again come to you. Thank you. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.